lock, and load. This is Steve Deace. The Steve Deace Show.
And happy Friday. Thanks for tuning in here today, live and on demand here on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace, Todd Erzin, and Aaron McIntyre. They are here with me as well. We have a very special guest for the Deace Group roundtable, our good friend Daniel Horowitz. We will say hello to him here in just a moment. 888-900-3393 is the number here at The Blaze. Steve at stevedeace.com. That's how you can email the program if you would like to do so. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. And if you're looking for samples to sample or share of this show, the video portion, youtube.com/Steve Deace is how you can do that. youtube.com/Steve Deace. Pardon me. It is a Friday. I'm really choked up about that, which means we have some of your feedback to get to next hour of the show. But before we take a look at what you have to say, we've got to take a look back at what the crazy voices in our head had to say first. It is time for the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was, with a hefty dose of woe and lamentation this week thrown in, courtesy of our good friend Daniel Horowitz. Let's get to issue, though, number one. You want some woe and lamentation? Here it comes. Bleep Democrats say.
Public service announcement. Excuse me. If y'all didn't know, this is the MSC, and frankly, there's just too many white people in here, and this is a space for people of color. So just be really cognizant of the space that you're taking up, because it does make some of us POCs uncomfortable when we see too many white people in here. It's only been open for 4 days, and frankly, there's the whole university for a lot of y'all to be at, and there's very few spaces for us. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
We feel entitled to artificially inseminate a cow.
And we believe that things will get better when workers of the world unite.
And when she gives birth, we steal her baby, even though her cries of anguish are unmistakable.
The year is now 2020, and here we women are, still in so many ways, not fully free, still shackled.
And then we take her milk that's intended for her calf, and we put it in our coffee and our cereal.
In addition to pay discrimination, we face pregnancy discrimination.
Where has your economic model ever worked?
Celebramos tu pertenencia en este país, y si este país es tu país también.
You would say that possession of heroin is not illegal.
Is not going to be dealt with through incarceration.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. You text Joe 23. Excuse me, I got to get this right. Joe to 30330. It is important that Iowa and Nevada have spoken. Well, guess what? The fact is, if you're going to take on the government, you need an F-15 with Hellfire missiles. There's no way an AK-47 is going to take care of you.
We have made do with crumbs for so long. And Bernie has said, hey, we're starving in this country. We can't subsist on these crumbs anymore. Why can't we demand the whole pie?
I'm not for that much socialism. I always say socialism, capitalism plus. I don't feel bad about having money. I'm already giving you over half, and when I've managed to save after you took over half, now you're going to come after that with a wealth tax?
Think about doing the wrong thing the way Mr. Trump did with General Soleiman. We have to ask, does that help us build a coalition of countries around the world to do the right thing? It absolutely does not. Being all by ourselves, being the empire in the Star Wars movie, does not put us in a position to get done what we need to get done.
I voted for Amy Klobuchar.
Tell me why?
I actually went in and eeny, meeny, miny, mowed it.
You're kidding
No,
me.
between two
Literally
candidates.
in the booth.
In the booth.
Because the sheets are signed not only by the precinct chair and the precinct secretary.
That video, I love it, with the chairman of the, now former, we should say, former chairman of the Iowa Democratic Party attempting to stand up there and explain away whatever the hell this caucus cycle was, and then the placard just falls off right there at the podium as he starts to talk. That's That's some providential stuff right there, folks. But let's get to it. Todd, I'll start with you. What tossed your salad this week, my friend? What are you into?
It's Joaquin Phoenix. I think when you won the Oscar for actually playing the Joker, and your speech is even weirder than the Joker, that's everything.
That's great.
The gig is done. The gig's done,
and
Joaquin.
By the way, if you've been following Joaquin Phoenix's life for like the last 10 years, that's the classiest and most dignified he has looked in a public setting since when, do you think? In the 21st century, maybe? I'm dead serious when I say that. I mean, like, he's been off on some wild tips, man. I mean, he stands up there and he looks like a real middle-aged Hollywood movie star, right? He's got a certain savoir-faire, and he opens his mouth. We artificially inseminate cows. And I got to wonder if other people in the room, even in that room, were like one of my favorite gifts. You know what I'm saying? Like the guy in the mullet. What is this? We artificially inseminate cows. Is this Joker too? And they're filming this right now in real time.
And when you juxtapose his deep concern for the baby cows with what Michelle Williams said at an award show like a month ago about what she had to do, get on with her life, is to kill the baby humans. There's just layers and layers of meaning in that thing.
The good thing is, though, Aaron Rodgers, your quarterback, he doesn't want to worship a God that would allow people that think the milk for a calf is more valuable than a human being. He doesn't want to worship a God that would allow those people to end up in a place like hell. So there's that.
Yeah, he took that whole relaxed thing a little too far.
He did, starting with his brain. Daniel, your turn. What was your favorite in Aaron's montage this week?
Well, I'm disappointed you didn't put Ivanka's global female empowerment in there. I think that would have fit well, maybe for next week's. Gosh, what tosses my salad? What doesn't toss my salad? Let's go with the one I think everyone will understand. Steve, what is the swamp? I'm saying if you had to define something that is the swamp, you would say it's this notion that in order to reach out to people of color, as someone in that video said, well, we need to go and if it's poor people of color, it means socialism. If it's Hispanics, it means open borders. And if it's African Americans, it means we love criminals. Okay, that was the swamp mindset. So in comes Bloomberg, campaigns for president. And rather than going after Bloomberg on opening up the prisons now, that's what he wants to do, and then taking away our guns as he lets out the gun felons, pretty nice argument to combat him with. Trump's campaign manager seeks to attack him from the left. He's racist because I caught past statements the guy said where he actually said most of the murder in New York is committed by non-whites and defending stop and frisk. I mean, Steve, what's next? I mean, are we going to say, hey, Amy Klobuchar actually supported border security in 2006, so she's anti-Hispanic? I mean, this is the sort of swamp crap for which we elected Trump. I mean, you look from man to beast and beast to man, and you couldn't tell the difference.
Have him on Thursday, they said. It'll be fun, they said, or Friday, whatever day this is.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, well, that didn't take long. That didn't take long. Todd, what's your name over there?
What day is it?
Aaron.
Who are my employees? I'm
glad Iowa and Nevada went first.
It's probably along the lines of what Daniel was saying, the general sentiment about this swamp. My favorite one, because she is all of us, really. All of us. The second to last clip, where the woman says, I did eeny, meeny, miny, mo to decide who I was going to vote for. I mean, Daniel and Steve and Todd, any one of us could come up with 5 examples off of the top of our head if we went and looked at any Republican, honestly, any Republican and who they faced during their election battle. And we could have just gone eeny, meeny, miny, mo and probably gotten the same results 95% of the time. So I like that one the most because, as you noted earlier this week, Steve, she's probably the most honest. And honestly, while we're being honest, because we weren't before, while we're being honest, that's basically what all of us do anyway. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It could be who the heck knows. Please, someone save us. That's basically what we do on a yearly basis.
You gotta love former Sex and the City star Cynthia Nixon, who's worth about $20 million. That's her net worth. Up there, railing on behalf of the proletariat, going Das Kapital, and shaking her fist for Bernie Sanders while he's flying first class, maybe on his way to his first, second, or third home. Who knows? Let's get to the exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being as limp and flaccid as Mitt Romney's claim he is, quote, profoundly religious, and 10 being as determined and zealous as Mitt Romney's love of himself, rate this week's level of total depravity, Todd.
9.
9. Wow. Aaron.
8.5.
8.5. Daniel, where are you?
10.
He's at a 10. All right. Let's get to issue 2. Nevada. I'm sorry. New Hampshire.
The New Hampshire primary is now in the books, and Bernie Sanders is your victor, but with a smaller margin than many forecasted. The socialist nearly beat former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg by about 4,000 votes. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar came in a surprising third at 19.8%, followed by Elizabeth Warren way back and forth at 9.2%. Joe Biden followed up one disaster in Iowa with another in New Hampshire and finished in a distant 5th place at 8.4%. A few of the exit polls from NBC show just 10% of New Hampshire voters get their news from Twitter. Another exit poll showed 11% of New Hampshire Democrat voters are aged 17 through 29. That's down from 19% in 2016. Another exit poll showed 69% of New Hampshire Democrat primary voters support free public college, while 61% support single-payer health care. A CNN exit poll showed white voters chose Sanders, followed closely by Pete Buttigieg and not too far off Amy Klobuchar, while non-white voters chose Sanders by a 2-1 margin over Joe Biden, 32% to 16%. That's followed closely by Pete Buttigieg. The vote totals for the winners of contested New Hampshire primaries in recent cycles are as follows. In 2000, John McCain won the state with 115,000 votes. 2004, John Kerry had 84,000 votes. 2008, McCain won again with 88,000. 2008, Clinton won with 112,000. 2016, Trump won with 100,000. And in 2020, Bernie Sanders won with just 72,000 votes.
What's interesting in the trend line there is in all the years that the party whose New Hampshire primary winner, even if they didn't go on to win the nomination, Hillary didn't in 98, in 08, Buchanan didn't in 96. But whenever that party's New Hampshire primary winner wins with a low vote total, that party has lost the general every single time. And when their party's winner has won with a high vote total, regardless of who is the nominee, that party has won the general every time. Just an interesting trend. Daniel, I'll start here with you on New Hampshire. What happened in this primary, do you think, and why?
I think you just said it, actually. I don't know if you meant to say it, but what it portends for the general election. So again, I'm always looking at opportunities for conservatives because I don't give a damn about Democrats. What could we do? What could we benefit from that? So you have this uncanny dichotomy where on the one hand, they're on their way to nominating an avowed anarchist socialist. But on the other hand, it's only a quarter of the electorate in New Hampshire. If you add Elizabeth Warren's totals, who, she's the other person running in the socialist lane, it's about a third of the electorate. And I think what's interesting, you look at New Hampshire, and then especially in the suburbs, places like Rockingham County, which is on the coast, and that is a county Democrats need to do well in. And I think that really does portend when Republicans win that county by 5 or more points, they usually win the general election. And Bernie Sanders did horribly there. What it demonstrates is Twitter is not America, MSNBC is not America, and it's not even a majority of the Democrat electorate. You asked that early on in this process. We're going to find out whether the Democrat electorate is as uniformly insane as what we see portrayed. And I think while a lot of them do get into misguided policies here and there, as Aaron explained in some of the exit polling data, most of them at least thought they were voting for people who are perceived as moderates. At least about 2/3 of the electorate chose people that, Buck Gang and Klobuchar, and then Gabby, what's her name? Tulsi Gabbard's, and a couple of the other ones. They are perceived as somewhat out of the box from the Democrat establishment, and then certainly not socialist anarchist. Again, to me, what that demonstrates is the majority aren't like that, but because of their dynamics, they're nominating Sanders. Republicans have a massive once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to win back suburban voters.
What do you think, Todd?
Well, it says two things to me, many things I'll highlight too. It's mostly about the falling out of confirming Biden and Elizabeth Warren, which I never believed either one had a chance. I've been saying as far back as the late summer. Now everybody sees it. They knew they had to move their votes somewhere else. That trend is only going to continue. Also, like in Iowa, where I said that there's evidence of that Buttigieg was going to do well because of their leaders, and like 1/3 of the Iowa counties had former Republicans, or maybe they still think of themselves as Republicans, working at high levels in his campaign. New voter turnout going in the direction coming over and crossing over to either Buttigieg or Klobuchar was pretty significant in this particular election. So Steve was just talking a couple of days ago about how votes are going to shift. If Trump gets more of a black vote, how many people who are Republicans going to come over, certainly not vote for Sanders, but if they get to vote for a Buttigieg or a Klobuchar, will they, as opposed to voting for Trump? There seems to be some evidence that some will.
I think there's far more evidence some would for a Buttigieg than a Klobuchar, because I need to tell the world I'm not homophobic, like I needed to tell the world that I wasn't racist before. But I think that's a valid point. Aaron, I want to go to you before I double back on some of what Daniel said. Go ahead.
So the overall takeaway from New Hampshire is I think two things can be true at the same time. There is at least some segment, it could be large, could be small, but even in a state like New Hampshire, there is a significant segment of the Democratic Party that has not yet made their peace with Bernie Sanders. Whether that means that they will remain resolute, and whether that through the upcoming states, time will tell. But that one, again, I hearken back to that one piece of exit polling from CNN about the non-white vote going to Bernie Sanders. If you want a bellwether maybe coming out of this particular primary, that might be it, especially as we get into some of the more diverse states coming up, especially in the southern region. Because as much as Democrats, as we know, love to be the party of intersectionality, I'm sorry to say for them that now that Andrew Yang has dropped out of the race, the last person of color that they have running who's actually viable is Elizabeth Warren. And I just don't think that she's going to be...
I see what you did. 2020th? Is that what she is now?
Yes.
Yes. See what I did there? Yes, indeed. All right, so Daniel, I want to go back to some of the observations that you made there for a second, because I wholeheartedly agree with every word there. They don't want him to be their nominee. But the problem is there's no mechanism in their party to nominate a true ideological moderate. I mean, moderate in their party is defined by your temperament and not your position on the issues. Because the difference between what Amy Klobuchar is articulating now and what Pete Buttigieg is articulating and Bernie Sanders is nothing. I mean, Pete Buttigieg was writing as a teenager that Bernie Sanders was his political idol, for goodness sakes. But they're perceived as the moderates because of their temperament. That they're not fist shakers. They don't yell at you. They don't, they smile when they say we're coming to get you, but they don't take off their shoe and stomp the podium with it. So how do they avoid him as their nominee when their party infrastructure, the media propaganda, the party leadership, etc., there's no place for a true ideological moderate to arise to crush him. So how do they avoid him being their nominee? I don't see a path that they can avoid it.
I have come to your position that you espoused a couple of weeks ago on the show, that Bernie will be the nominee because of that. See, they have the same problem we do, but from the inverse direction. What we've learned from these primaries, very interestingly, is that the Republican base, Republican primary voters, are to the right of where the party poobahs, the elites, the apparatus is. 70% of primary voters, many states a lot more than that, voted for either Trump or Cruz, where, the party establishment badly wanted one of the other ones. Whereas when it comes to the Democrats, we're seeing that the voters are actually more relatively moderate than where the party elites are. So I very much think, and I really do wonder, if you had not a moderate running maybe on Bill Clinton's 90s platform, but a legitimate moderate relative to today that had the backing and didn't run, theoretically, I think they could win, that there are enough voters that would want them. But exactly what you said, they're Fox News, except it's a little bit more diverse. They don't have a one Fox, but every version of it, whether it's online and digital and all the things that really get the active people, it's not going to allow for it. It is just simply not going to allow for it. But I'm just telling you, if you had someone talk about minimum wage, we'll give you this, some college help, health care, but look, we're not going to harbor MS-13.
Right, we're not going to do Medicare for all, but we'll have a subsidized buy-in public option if you can't afford your own insurance or an Obamacare plan. I'm pro-gay marriage, but we're not going to do bake the cake bigot. I'm pro-choice, but I'm not for late-term abortion, stuff like that. Yeah,
what I'm saying is the voters in the Democrat electorate, I think enough of them could sustain that. But it's the same problem with us, just a mirror image.
Agreed.
Well, our voters want our stuff, but we lose every freaking election because, Trump was unique in different circumstances because the apparatus won't allow for it.
So let's say Michael Bloomberg, it's too late for him now to do what I'm suggesting, okay? But let's say from the outset, he had run a candidacy that tested this theory. That said, I can pull a Trump. I've got billions of dollars. I've got more money than Trump. I can do this. I can just set up my own economy of scale within the Democratic Party. And the point of my running is that I just think the Republican Party is too far right, and I'm going to articulate, a Dwight Eisenhower, JFK message. And I'm going to test the autonomy, the authority of the MSNBCs and the Voxes and the New York Timeses of the world. And I'm going to use my considerable wealth, which he has done already, but I'm going to use my considerable wealth not to produce watch me eat big gay ice cream videos that are very awkward, but to articulate, this is how I cleaned up New York City. This is how we did it. And I'm going to adopt some of those Democratic positions because frankly, I've had them my whole life anyway. That's why I was a terrible Republican. What would have happened from day one if he would have stepped forward, Daniel, and tested that theory with his wealth? If he would have stepped to their media industrial complex and said, I don't like Trump did, I'm going to call your bluff. I don't think you got it. I think I can go directly to Main Street America and screw you. I don't need you. What would have happened if he had done that?
So I think there's an interesting case to be made if he would do that in a general election, doing a Ross Perot type of thing from a different angle. I think that could potentially do a lot of damage with suburban voters. But in a primary, I think it's the same principle you just said. He ain't Trump. He's just not. He doesn't have that populist appeal. He is, in fact, the caricature of what really voters in both parties don't like, whether it's fair or unfair, the sleazy Wall Street type of guy. There's just nothing about him that speaks to people. There isn't. You focus a lot on the money and some of the New York record, maybe on crime if you were to actually run on it, but it's the wrong character. He just doesn't have the personality for it.
Todd, I think you agree with that?
Absolutely nailed it.
Do you believe that it just wouldn't work, period? Or Daniel's caveat there at the end that he doesn't have the personality himself to pull it off?
It's Daniel's caveat.
So you think someone with the right personality could pull something like that off?
They're doing Trump, Bernie, Bernie is
Bernie is doing a form of it right now,
but
isn't he?
people believe that Bernie is an opposer. He believes what he says. People believe Trump, even though he doesn't necessarily believe the things he says. They believe that personality is the actual thing. It's real. It's not a fake. Everything about Bloomberg seems packaged. And the big gay ice cream, that was his persona speaking out. He's just a fake.
Yes, if I can chime in. I mean, for those of you who have watched Parks and Recreation, minus the dumb, Mike Bloomberg is pulling a Bobby Newport here. I mean, he was, yesterday morning, he was talking about how his family's housekeeper used to throw games of Scrabble so that his mother could win. I kid you not.
I'm sorry. That made me choke.
This is Bobby Newport.
That happened?
Telling the audience about his housekeeper saying, "Little Bobby, I ain't gonna clean your room no moss." That's guy. He's just not. Aside from being not likable, he's just not relatable on any level.
Daniel, I don't know if you struggle with this. Todd and Aaron hear me complaining about it all the time. Now it's your turn. How did a guy like Michael Bloomberg, how did he get all that money? And why am I driving a 2014 Ford Edge? Explain that to me.
Steve, come on. You work in this industry. You know that the, let's think of a nice word, the fecal matter rises to the top. I mean, that's just how it is. In this business of all businesses, one of the things that has amazed me in this world, certainly in politics, but I'm starting to realize it's true in the business world as well. You know, when I was young, I started out in this business, I would really prepare before I'd go to Congress for meetings, prepare the issues. And then I'd get there like, you got him? Like, you got to be kidding me. These guys are dumb as mud. But they do well for themselves. And I'm the poor slob here. It just, you know, it's God has his way of rewarding dirtbags in this world. That's it's part of his plan. I mean, no, and
so saith the Psalms.
There's an inverse relationship. I mean, look, this world is temporary, and the crap rises to the top.
That's like an interesting paraphrase on the rain falls on the just and the unjust. Like God awards the dirtbags as he sees fit.
All right, let's get to the exit question. If the odds Bernie Sanders will be the 2020 Democrat nominee were a Queen song, which Queen song would it be? A, Another One Bites the Dust, as in no way. B, We Are the Champions, it's happening. Or C, Radio Gaga. Who the hell knows what that means? Todd.
C, Radio Gaga.
You think it's still open that he could not be? Okay.
I love though that you've just done a whole 180 on this. Don't stop being you.
Oh, I'm not. I mean, it is inevitable. It's inevitable. Daniel, what do you think? Which is it?
Another One Bites the Dust.
You don't think he'll be the nominee?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know what you mean. No, I think he will be.
All right, so you think it's We Are the Champions. Okay.
But he'll lose but he'll lose the general.
Yeah, I was talking about just winning the nomination. Just the nomination.
Oh, so then, I mean, the two work backwards. So then, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think, Aaron?
I'm still with C. Crazy voices, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm. It's not that I'm disagreeing with you guys. I'm trying to play out in my head as you guys are saying it's still murky.
That's your problem.
How do we get to another scenario?
Well, you didn't think we could get to where you live right now. Stop trying to think so far ahead. Just embrace the nuts of the moment.
That is true. I didn't think I'd even be saying this just about a few months ago. But I mean,
now it makes you so happy.
It is. I have found a place of peace, joy, love, and contentment. I have. Yes, Bernie Sanders, known socialist wannabe. Anyway, it is done, determined. So say we all. At least me. He will be the 2020 Democratic nominee, Jeremy Corbyn 2.0. All right, when we come back, we've got 2 issues down, 2 more to go, including we have one of America's greatest athletes urging his son to become his daughter. And we're going to discuss that controversy and more here when we come back in just a few minutes. Live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Stay tuned.
This is Steve Deace
on the Blaze Radio Network.
so that the world may know. This is Steve Deace.
Back here on the Steve Deace Show. We'll get back to the Deace Group here in a moment, brought to you by our friends over at Keeps, who know that losing your hair sucks. But what doesn't suck is keeping your hair without ever leaving your couch. And if you're losing your hair, you got to know about Keeps. Keeps offers the generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products. That means they're the real deal, but they sell them to you for substantially less, because those generic versions won't cost you a fortune like the other ones will. But here's all you need to do. Just go online, answer a few simple questions, snap a few pics of your hair, and a doctor will review everything. Recommend the right FDA-approved hair loss treatment for you, and then it's shipped discreetly to your door. So you're wondering, will it work? Well, not only does it work for the vast majority of guys, but about 2/3 of guys experience hair regrowth as well. So if it's time to do something about it, take care of it, go to keeps.com/grow. That's keeps.com/grow. And they'll give you 50% off your first order. That's right, half off your first order at keeps.com/grow. Back to the Deace Group Roundtable, our weekly look at the week that was. Let's get to issue 3. Dwayne Wade.
NBA superstar Dwayne Wade appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres Show recently to talk about his son.
We are proud. When I say proud, we are proud parents of a child in the LGBTQ plus community, and we're proud allies as well. And we take our roles and our responsibility as parents very seriously. So when our child comes home with a question, when a child comes home with an issue, when a child comes home with anything, it's our job as parents to listen to that, to give them the best information that we can, the best feedback that we can. And that doesn't change because sexuality is now involved in it. So once Zaya, 12-year-old, came home, and first Zion, everybody, I don't know if everyone knows, originally named Zion born as a boy, came home and said, hey, so I want to talk to you guys. I think going forward, I'm ready to live my truth. And I want to be referenced as she and her. I would love for you guys to call me Zaya.
So I want us to discuss this as personally as we can and not philosophically, because here's a real person with a real name who is really confused, as are obviously as parents. So, Aaron, I'm going to start with you. If all-time NBA great Dwayne Wade, if he were on this show with us today, and this topic came up, what would you say to dissuade him from encouraging gender dysphoria in his son? What would you say?
Well, first of all, I think, and I want to preface this answer, and I don't want to take too much time, but I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying I don't want to go all Beth Moore here and start hurling insults at mysterious and unknown figures, but because I haven't really seen a whole heck of a lot of discussion about Dwayne Wade this week. At least I haven't witnessed it in person. So I would say, and I'm glad you brought this up, that discuss this as personally as possible, because there are going to be men in your own community who, if they see you just making fun of Dwayne Wade or ripping him on social media, again, not seeing this predominantly, I don't want to pull a Beth Moore, but again, try to handle this as adult and as I don't know, just sensitively as possible. If they see you ripping somebody like Dwayne Wade, they're probably not going to have an opportunity to say, to have a conversation, the fictional conversation that you just brought up. As far as him being on the show with us right now, the only way that you can have this conversation with somebody like this is at a deeply spiritual level. That's the only way that you can have it. Because in your assent, which is why I'm never, ever, ever, ever using the preferred pronouns of anyone. I'll slip up every now and then because That's the game. That's the stupid game that we play. I'm never going to use the pronouns because I would be lying about their gender, because it's an outright denial of their imago Dei. They still have the imago Dei. It's an outright denial of the way in which God made them specifically. And so the only way, when you assent on any level to tranny madness, whatever you want to call it, to gender dysphoria, you are in part and parcel, you are encouraging people to say, no, God did not make me like this. God made a mistake. The only way to have these conversations is at a spiritual level, and walking him through how we were made, why we were made the way we were. And, if it's just a dude on dude conversation like this, you might even be able to, if you have some sort of rapport, being like, man, Dwayne, would you back a few years ago, would you and LeBron and what was Bosch playing for them now, would you have gone and played against WNBA? Not in a million years would you play against WNBA players, but you want your son to be able to do that now. Things like, you can bring things up like that, but you're not going to have any luck. You're not going to have any success. You're not going to have any sort of profitable conversation unless you actually are both on the same page, that you understand how we were created and that we were created specifically in specific ways. And until you set that groundwork and lay that foundation, it's kind of going to be a fruitless conversation.
Todd?
I think there's a lot more to using the kind of examples you said regarding NBA basketball. It's not as a replacement for the spiritual, but to make him wear the absurdity of something immediate like that. He'd have to recognize that that's absurd if he played in the WNBA, what that would end up looking like. This is about using his principles and fleshing them out. He wants to talk about accepting their truth. That his son is 12 years old, I believe, right now. Mm-hmm. Ask him, in his first 12 years of life, how many times could he fill up the fingers on both hands in 12 years of the times his son did something or said something, behavior, said something to a sibling, said something to that, where you did not accept his truth, where in fact you said, oh, hell no, you disciplined them because there was a greater truth than his truth at stake. I'm certain that if you don't tell me there's at least 10 times in these figures, having raised 4 children myself, you're lying to me. You did not accept their truth. They did or said something that was unacceptable. I would also then ask them, okay, that being said, in the future, can you imagine them doing or saying anything at all that you would not accept as their truth? Because it's not the truth as you see it. And again, if you did not acknowledge that, I say to you, you would be lying to me. This is a feel-good scam that can obviously live on and bloom when you're sitting there next to Ellen DeGeneres, but you really don't believe it if you connect any rudimentary dots at all. Look around you. People's truths suck. And you agree with me because, well, let's go walk down the street together, Dwayne Wade, and you will say that's dumb. But it's their truth, right? This is insanity on a level that earlier in the show we talked about the black girl telling to get out of at Virginia, telling white people to leave.
Yep.
This is on that level of just being hollow and shallow thinking.
Daniel, quickly.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit with Aaron that there's no practical angle to this. It's only spiritual. Piggybacking off of what Todd said, I got 3 boys. Never a day goes by when they don't posit something stupid. That's just what kids do. They're forever fantasizing about things and want to do crazy things. My 7-year-old son thinks he's a bunny and wants to be treated as such too, by the way. That's just, they do that. But what they know is, they know deep down it's absurd. Why? Because the parents put up that wall and they look to the parents for guidance. The minute you show something this severe and life-altering and immutable, and that charts you on a course that you cannot take back, that does not end well, the minute you accept that, you have condemned them to a life of that, and you cannot take that back. If the parent says that's normal, you cannot take that back. And there are a lot of practical things. The reality is and what is it? LGBTQ plus. I never heard of that. So they're capping it at the Q, I guess. I was wondering if they're going to add letters.
Oh, it's IA. There's an IA after the Q now. Yeah.
Well, they should put a $sign. I mean, I think that's the most important.
Oh, come on now.
But anyway, but here's the deal. So on the one hand, it's like this is the highest form of man. Have the thing between your legs and cut it off or mutilate, whatever. Oh, I don't know what they do. But on the other hand, what's interesting is reality does set in. So the same groups have all these websites about the suicide problem. There is up to 41% attempted suicide rate. The other thing is this. When you start, and I don't know how far they want to take it, you start injecting yourself and mutilating yourself, that they don't live long. I mean, there is not enough showing that they live good lives. So that's the thing. You as a father are fueling something that is certain to end bad. Now you see a lot of confusion. There's problems. But at 8, 10, 12, there's lots of confusion and problems on, as Todd mentioned, many other issues, and you don't indulge it.
All right, let's skip the exit question because I want to make sure we have enough time. All right.
Can I just add one thing really, really quickly here?
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as the question that was asked, if this came up with Dwayne Wade right now, the Dwayne Wade that I heard on the Ellen DeGeneres show is completely given over and worked over by this, which is why I said at a spiritual level until, and I didn't say it was only spiritual, by the way. I said it was primarily spiritual. If you're not on the same page, there's no point. There's absolutely no point in having this conversation unless you can get that one thing nailed down.
Meaning you see it, his religious viewpoint is what led him to accept his son's mental illness.
Exactly.
That this didn't produce a religious impulse. His religious impulse is what produced this reaction.
Yes. Now, if you're telling me if he's conflicted about it, then everything I think that Daniel and Todd said, that's
a valuable distinction. All right. You know what? I am going to ask the exit question really quick because it's snarky. True or false? Just give me a true or false. A Republican mentally ill with gender dysphoria will be appointed to office or win elected office within the next 5 years. Todd.
So.
Daniel.
True. Within 3 years.
Yeah, you gave me a cell. You meant false, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right. Daniel says true and will be sooner.
Yeah.
Aaron?
True. And in the true Price is Right fashion, I'll take 2 years.
Daniel, bye.
All right. Issue 4, the XFL.
The XFL had its inaugural weekend of the current version of Vince McMahon's attempt at a professional football league. With reimagined rules and an eye towards innovation, the XFL hopes to at least become entertaining and carve out a niche market for professional spring football. TV ratings for the 4 games over the weekend were decent, with an average of over 3 million viewers. Fan attendance at the games averaged just over 17,000, though some cities like St. Louis, who's gearing up for nearly 30,000 fans for its first home game, have not yet hosted. The average margin of victory during opening weekend was 14.5 points.
All right. First question. Let's do these quickly, and I'll start with you, Todd. How would you describe the debut of Vince McMahon's second attempt at a professional football league?
Fun. I think they took themselves seriously enough to be a business that isn't going to fold like 5 games in like the last one. I answered, but mostly they were like, this is football after all, and we're going to make sure that everybody is having fun.
Daniel, what about you? Did you pay attention to it at all? You got a team there in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I didn't pay much attention to it, but it is impressive. And I do think, look, with the National Felon League, all of the problems, even some of the game problems we have now, there's a lot of gripes from all ends. I think there is appetite for it, but the question is, does it have staying power?
Aaron?
I think this was... I think it was really, really good. Good start. I think the most underestimated or underrated, I guess I should say, at least in my eyes, rule change was the play clock. And because they shortened it to, I believe, about 24 seconds or somewhere around there.
This is the time between plays that you're allowed. Yeah.
Exactly. It made a really... Now, I didn't get to watch a ton of it, but it made for a really, really fast-paced game. that's really, really cool.
I'm curious, were there a lot of delay of game penalties with coaches? Because a lot of these coaches are coming from college in the NFL with a longer play clock and they aren't used to it, but did they adjust to it just fine?
I didn't see much of that. One thing that helps is that there's an official dedicated to just spotting the ball. That's his entire job. So that kind of helps, but I didn't see any delay. I saw maybe one delay of game penalty, but that's about it.
All right, exit question. Will the XFL still exist 5 years from now? Daniel.
No. As much as I'm an anti-establishment guy, I know that the NFL is too big to fail. It's still too big of an institution, despite its problems. It's like the Republicans and Democrats. It's going to be around, and therefore the XFL won't.
What do you think, Todd?
I think it will be around. I think it will. I think the appetite for it, combined with the fact that the men of 30 years ago just don't think that they have to spend as much time on other things. That's why I say all the time, Steve is a unicorn. All the knowledge he has about professional sports, there's many other men, and if as much as not knowledge, those men aren't spending as much time kneeling before God, learning about politics, having other hobbies. That's the issue.
What do you think, Aaron?
Especially if the average attendance this year sticks around 20,000 or pushes 20,000, and then if they can get a viewership of around a million or a little bit under that, I think then that's already on the way to solvency.
Don't underestimate the sports wagering angle to this too. This is a very sports wagering friendly enterprise, and you need content, right? And then what's the number one sport by far people like to wager on in America? And it's not even close. It's football. And it's not even close.
It's featured within the game itself right now, is it not? I mean, that's
similar to fantasy football has helped make the NFL. They couldn't ruin it if they tried, because fantasy football is one of the biggest industries in America by itself. I could see sports wagering keep the XFL around for a good number of years.
They're called what? Prop bets, aren't they? That's what they have within the game.
Yep.
Yeah. That people are going to go to that like crack.
Let's get to predictions. Daniel, go.
Alrighty. Donald Trump's going to win the election, no doubt about it. I'm not sure whether they're going to take over the House or not, but here's what I do know. Either next year or the year afterwards, they will pass a massive pro-criminal bill and a massive amnesty bill, and you will learn to love it and you will like it, because conservative media will tell you it is the greatest deal of all time.
If you look at the trend line of second-term Republican presidencies, I mean, for decades, exactly. This has been often what we have seen. We even saw it under Reagan. We saw a massive amnesty bill under Reagan. All right, Todd.
Assuming Klobuchar continues a baseline level of debate performance and doesn't have any major gaffes or anything like that, she will finish second in South Carolina.
Yeah, I could see that. I could, yeah. What do you think, Aaron? What's yours?
As far as what Daniel said, I want to comment on that really, really fast. Are you saying that we're going to hear the words, we have to suspend border security to save the border? I'm guessing we're going to...
exactly.
My St. Louis Battlehawks are going to make it.
10D chess, baby.
Yes. My St. Louis Battlehawks are going to make it. Not win it, but make it to the inaugural XFL championship game.
Wow. We had an XFL... championship prediction.
Take.
Wow. Guys, Tom Brady's quarterback in the New England Patriots next year. This whole thing is ridiculous. I'm calling BS. This is half call and BS, half prediction. Similar to how I called BS on the Tom Holland Spider-Man's leaving the MCU. No, he wasn't. That was all a negotiating ploy. It was never happening. Way too much money was being made by everybody. That was never going to happen. Tom Brady is not going to Chicago. Okay, no, this is...
Is that a rumor?
Yes. No. He's quarterback in the Patriots next year. All right. Daniel, good to see you, my friend. As always, thanks for joining us here on the Deace Group.
Take care.
Plenty of woe and lamentation there from our good friend, Mr. Horowitz. When we come back, hour 2, we'll get to some of your woe and lamentation. It'll be Feedback Friday. And I set it aside for... We got a lot of social media reaction to the question we had earlier this week. Are we underestimating Bernie on the right, the way that the left underestimated Trump in 2016? We'll get to some of your thoughts on that and more when we get to Feedback Friday here in hour number 2. Next, stay tuned.
The truth, straight, no chaser. Steve Deace.
On the Blaze Radio Network.
lock, and load. This is Steve Deace. The Steve Deace Show.
Hola, welcome to Hour 2, live and on demand here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace with Todd and Aaron. We'll be getting to Feedback Friday here in a moment at 888-900-3393, 888-900-3393. Steve at stevedeace.com. That's how you can email us and let us know what you think about what we think. You can also try, emphasis on try, liking us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. And if you're looking for video clips of this program to sample or share, go to youtube.com/Steve Deace. And the last name is Deace. If you do listen to us via the podcast, please, we would beg of you to consider leaving us a 5-star review at whichever podcast platform you prefer, because the more of those we get, the more it helps us to find more people like you, and then the more likely we can continue doing things like Feedback Friday and Theology Thursday and all the other mediocrity and frivolity that we offer you each and every broadcast day here on The Steve Deace Show. Feedback Friday brought to you by Reality Zone, who wants to give you a reality check. I kid because I care. It's Riduzone. But they want to put you in the reality zone because it's tough keeping those New Year's resolutions. The vast majority of them fail by about this time of year. All right. So what do you do with it when the resolve weakens, when it gets harder and harder, because dieting alone is hard? Working out is important, but in the end, you can't out-train a bad diet. So what do? How do you get those cravings and portion sizes under control? Thankfully, there is Riduzone, backed by doctors and not one but 2 U.S. patents. Riduzone is the only FDA-accepted product that includes OEA, the naturally occurring molecule that helps you feel full faster. It burns stored fat and then also reduces your caloric intake at the same time, making it easier for you to live up to your resolution. So if you want to give it a shot, Riduzone is exclusively available at its website, RIDUZONE, riduzone.com, RIDUZONE. And if you want to give it a shot, we got a great offer for you, up to 65% off with free shipping. Up to 65% off with free shipping. How do you take advantage of that? Well, use my name, Steve, as the promo code when you go to riduzone.com, RIDUZONE, riduzone.com, promo code Steve. Let's get to some Feedback Friday. And as I promised on Monday, because we had a ton of calls in reaction to this question, are we on the right underestimating Bernie Sanders as a potential Democratic nominee the way the left underestimated Donald Trump back in 2016? And we had a very informative and fun conversation about that in our town hall on Monday. But because of the overwhelming response we got via the email and the phone calls on that day, I couldn't get to any of the social media reaction. And there's some really good stuff on our Facebook page, hundreds of comments. So I wanted to take some time here on Feedback Friday this week, gentlemen, and give some of our social media commenters on this topic their due, because I think this is, of course, one of the reoccurring themes of this year. And if he ends up being the nominee, this could be one of the biggest stories of the year that we're going to cover, right?
Yeah.
Let's start with Jeffrey Derby. And he says he thinks the exact same thing, that Bernie is laughed off as a joke candidate, but has an incredible grassroots network. He says, I don't think he has a chance against Trump on the debate stage, but his admirers are just as rabid as the Trumpites were in 2016. What do you think? And keep in mind on the debate stage thing, I mean, Donald Trump did not perform well on the debate stage in 2016. His best debate was the one that came out that happened after the Billy Bush video, grab him by the privates video came out, which means it didn't matter how good he was in that debate. He lost just by being alive that day because it was right after that video. I mean, we all remember the clip of after the third debate. He got so upset he took up, the papers that were at his podium and ripped him up or threw him up or in the air or something. Do you remember that video that was going around? But what do you think of Jeffrey's observation that he says, yes, he does think we're underestimating Sanders, particularly given how rabid his grassroots network is?
I'll just reset what I said. The reason we got this far is through materialism in this country. And all of that laziness and softness that came with it, people started believing and saying all kinds of nonsensical things that they say because they see that's the way the crowd's going. But the materialism doesn't go away. So, but most of them don't have shows like Bill Maher. Like, look at Bill Maher. Flat out said this, I'm capitalist plus. I'm not a socialist. I mean, this is getting a little crazy, isn't it? Now, Bill Maher still at the end of the day, Trump versus Bernie Sanders, may end up voting for Sanders. The guy's got a public platform that he's got an image, a persona, whatever. Most people just are going on with their lives. And their lives have a lot more to do with protecting a bottom line and their stuff. Even if they've never voted Republican in low tax bracket their entire life. But if it really starts crashing in on their reality, they're not going to vote for Bernie Sanders. They might not vote at all, but they're not going to vote for Bernie Sanders.
What do you think, Aaron?
So, for some reason, this came to me while you were reading this particular bit of feedback. But I'm increasingly wary of now comparing this election cycle to the last election cycle. And I just thought of this while you were reading that. So it's widely agreed, and some would even say that the main reason why Trump even had a chance against Hillary Clinton is because she was by far the most unlikable candidate that maybe we've ever seen in American politics represent a major party. She was incredibly unlikable. In a two-person race, Bernie Sanders lost to that. What's that say about Bernie Sanders in a crowded field? You see you're picking up what I'm putting down here. Mm-hmm. Why would we assume that when Hillary Clinton who was a terrible candidate, a terrible candidate, when she was able to defeat Sanders, why would we think that Sanders now all of a sudden poses more of a threat now when he lost to Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton did? Food for thought there.
That's interesting for sure. You bet. Matt Hamilton posted this. It's possible Sanders is similar to Trump in that they both have an unpalatable quality. With Trump, it's his character. With Sanders, it's the idea of a socialist becoming president. Socialism still has a low approval rating among the general population. However, there could be a lot of people who vote for him in the general despite that because they'd rather see Trump voted out. This was similarly apparent in 2016 when people voted for Trump despite his character because they didn't want Hillary elected. I'm going to respond to this one first because this makes a lot of sense, Matt. Whether you're right or not, the analysis makes a lot of sense, except for one thing. Neither Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump were incumbent presidents in 2016. So nobody had a presidential record to run on that either made you say, I can't stand this person, but you know what? Things are going well here on the home front. I'll put up with them for another 4 years because I don't want to take a gamble that blankety blank will screw it up. All right. Or the other way around, which was this is Jimmy Carter Redux. This is Read My Lips Redux with George Herbert Walker Bush. We got to have anything else. It has to be better than this. And so let's give the new person a shot. That wasn't on the table in 2016. And that's a powerful dynamic in presidential elections when an incumbent is. And it is on the table in 2020, guys. And I think that's going to overwhelm any of these kinds of sentiments because Trump has a record now. And it may mean there's a certain group of people that because of his record, he won't get to support him that he should because of the persona angle that you're talking about, Matt. I could certainly buy into that. I think there's validity to that, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. But on a macro level, the state of the country is going to overwhelm Bernie Sanders. Like if unemployment hits 6% in October, it doesn't matter how many times he can call him a socialist, communist, Marxist, a mother blanking socialist. It won't matter what he calls him. He's going to lose. He's going to lose to the guy. That because this is going to be about about his record and the direction of the country more than it's going to be about those other things because he's the incumbent. It's a referendum on him and his record, and that's where Now, if let's say the economy doesn't tank, but slows how good it is, then it becomes like a formulaic ratio. We saw this in 2004, where George W. Bush was personally popular, but his policies necessarily were not. And Iraq was just beginning to become the quagmire that it became full-blown in his second term. Well, when that's the case, then what people think of the alternative becomes more germane on whether they might cut you some slack, give you a second chance, whether they think he's too radical, okay? So I'm not saying these things are never referendums on the challenger. I'm not saying that. But the thoughts of the challenger only become germane to voters that weren't just going to vote for whoever the challenger was no matter what. All right. The thoughts on the challenger only become germane when you have questions about the record of the current office holder. So the first thing that's going to be decided in this election, no matter who the Democrats nominate, is going to be, do you think Donald Trump is doing a good job as president? That's going to be the number one question decided, period. Now, I didn't say it was the only one, but it's going to be the number one. Thoughts?
I think it's going to, if Donald Trump does his job, Bernie Sanders is perfectly suited to be caricatured by a guy like Donald Trump. And obviously, Donald Trump, his default is to caricature everybody, oftentimes Republicans in ways that they did not deserve, the name calling, but it ultimately ended up being effective in many ways. In a good economy, the way you will be able to take Bernie Sanders' record of, he's almost 80 years old. I mean, how many years? 50, 60 years of whatever. Right. People rolling tape of him saying and doing all kinds of things with all kinds of shady people and shady places. There simply is no way, I think, for Donald Trump to lose this thing. It's not me elevating him to any sort of grand Reagan-esque status. I think this, in many ways, it's just 1 + 1 = 2 of our materialism ultimately will beat out most people's ideology.
I don't want to take the commenter out of context in case they were talking about maybe a macro victory against the ideology that Bernie Sanders espouses. Jeremy Corbynism is not going away. It didn't die with his resounding defeat. Now, it might have been, you can argue that it was definitely set back. I mean, you can set back and provide a speed bump for the type of macro worldview clashes that we're talking about through elections. You're never going to defeat them through elections. You have to essentially do the same thing that they did to us, the long march through the institutions, and an election is not going to do that. Calling him even effectively calling him a communist, and pointing out all of the pitfalls and the many and multitudes that there are, the pitfalls of socialism, that may be done, but until you have a populace that is actually willing and able to just reject those offhand, just as a whole, at a gut level, you're not going to win that argument. You may delay it, you may win the battle of the argument, but an election is not going to win that argument.
One more thing, and Steve, you would know the names of the towns in Michigan, no doubt, but we had a former company town here in Iowa, Newton. Maytag was there. Yep. And once Maytag left, it's kind of reinventing itself now, but that's been like a 20-year process. I think this national vote is basically going to be like a company town vote. You know, the CEO, everybody lives there in that town. Almost everybody works there. And they're like, I may not like the guy, but my job's dependent on this thing, and things are going pretty well, and the streets are clean. That's the way people are going to see this with a guy like Donald Trump versus socialism in a good economy.
You know, one of the things that's fascinating about Sanders as a quote democratic socialist is there's some subtext going on with him in the Nevada caucus the last couple of days, where the culinary union out there, it's a heavily unionized state, but the culinary union's the biggest one because of all the restaurants and casinos and everything else. And it's not just Vegas, but Reno has a lot of that. Has a lot of that stuff too. And the head of the Culinary Association, everybody thought it was for sure that it was just nobody has even tried getting their endorsement. This was automatic. They were going to endorse Bernie Sanders. Well, the head of the Culinary Union announced yesterday they weren't going to endorse anyone.
This is what I'm talking about, man.
And the reason he said they weren't going to endorse anyone is because they're not satisfied with Sanders' views on automation. And apparently Sanders has said some things that it could be, a viable cost-cutting way. It could be a viable ingenuity. In other words, he's a Soviet. From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Okay? And if someone can do that job, or something can do that job, bigger, faster, quicker, the tension there between Marxism doesn't believe you're created in the image of God. Marxism doesn't believe you have any inherent worth as an individual. It believes you have an inherent grievance as a class of individuals. I'm going to say that again because it's really damn smart, and it's important you understand this, okay? Marxism doesn't believe you have any inherent worth as an individual. It believes you have an inherent grievance as part of a class of individuals. And this is where you get into, this is where you'll see some differences between what a Tucker Carlson is saying, his form of a right-wing populism, and pure Sovietism, is that ultimately human beings, if they've outlived their usefulness to the system, are chattel to a Marxist. You have no value. If you've outlived your usefulness, there's no use for you. Now, I'm not saying I always agree with him, but what guys like Tucker Carlson are arguing, because what's going to happen this year is if Bernie is the nominee, which I believe he will be, but if he is, you're going to see the Cato Institute corporatist Republican sect, or the Cato materialistic libertarian sect of the Republican Party. They're going to basically say guys like, well, your old buddy Rick Santorum and Tucker Carlson are you might as well go vote for Bernie. Their ideas are similar. No, they're not. Their ideas aren't similar because they don't even start from the same premise. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with with everything where they're on the issues. That's a separate conversation, okay? But see, Carlson is beginning his populism from the premise of, hey, you know what? That worker bee at the textile mill that you shipped his job to Mexico, he's made in the image of God every bit as much as the corporate CEO that got to make trillions of dollars off of shipping his job to Mexico. So why are we favoring one Imago Day here over the other? Because the one Imago Day has a big super PAC and the textile mill worker doesn't. That's not the same as the textile mill worker has a grievance. And since he's putting in the majority of the work, he should be getting his fair share. But then later on, if we find out something else can do the work better than that textile mill worker, sucks for that textile mill worker. That's the difference. And it's a distinction with a massive difference.
Yep.
It is a distinction with a massive difference. Okay. So, that I found that to be a fascinating subtext to Bernie Sanders' candidacy. And we'll see how it plays out in the Nevada caucus here. I think that's in a week from Tuesday, I think is when it is. And how many of the culinary people just vote for him anyway? I don't know the intricacies of Nevada politics to know how much of the culinary union just sits around waiting for the head of their union to send them a email telling them, here's who we're endorsing. I don't know enough to know that. And the good news is they're going to have a caucus and we're going to find out the answer to that, right? We're going to watch it play out in real time. But this is where you get the difference between a a left-wing populism or slash Marxism versus a right-wing populism. They're not beginning from the same premise. There are times they will agree on policies. I agree with you on that. They will. There's times they'll come to some same agreements, but they're beginning from vastly different premises. You guys want to comment on that?
Yeah,
You want to move on?
Leave it.
Okay.
That's perfect.
This is from Laura Parker. She says, I believe Bernie's going to be the candidate for them, but I don't believe he can win against Trump. I have to have faith that my fellow Americans would not put a socialist into office. Well, I would argue we already have. Now, they didn't call themselves that, but we have been operating proto versions of socialism since before. I mean, Medicare predates me. I'm going to be 47 this year. Social Security, I mean, that predates most of you watching, I would guess. That's pre-baby boomer. I mean, that's pre-World War II. That's the New Deal.
Your person, and this person is listening to what you said multiple times now. If this economy was in tough shape, they would.
Yeah.
Your faith would not keep that from happening.
Now, if you're talking about somebody who just is openly avowed, and wants it whole cloth as opposed to piecemeal situationally, I think it does depend on what the position of the economy is. And as I said a few days ago, if things are still going, even if they're not going as well as they are now, just relatively well, then I think Donald Trump could win by margins that would have been, not even amongst the most ardent of his shield brigade would have posited some of these suggestions, while they were counting who had the most supporters at their inauguration, Trump or Obama. But if we see real economic slowdown, if you see anything like a TARP in 2008, particularly if it comes from the stock market, which feeds right into Bernie Sanders' talking points. If you see a stock market bubble where, a lot of that recovery is based off of credit and repo expenditures. If you were to see the stock market hit a bubble like the housing market did, when it was also largely based on credit and creditors who couldn't pay, I think you could then see Bernie Sanders win by margins that would have been not previously contemplated. Because I think a large swath of the American psyche is up for grabs.
Great way of putting it.
And I think that the majority of the Democratic Party does not want Bernie Sanders to be their nominee for various reasons. And over 90% of them are going to vote for him if he's the nominee the first Tuesday this November. A whole bunch of people didn't want Mitt Romney to be the nominee in 2012. Over 90% of them voted for him on the first Tuesday in November. Even more people didn't want Donald Trump to be the nominee. Almost all of them voted for him on the first Tuesday in November. So he's going to get, if he gets that nomination, if he gives a nomination speech in Milwaukee and his health stays good and he's on the ballot in November, he's getting 60 million votes just by showing up, just by having his name there. 60 million Americans are not going to see past their partisan blinders, or roughly thereabouts. Maybe it'll be 56, 57, but it'll be roughly 60 million Americans are not going to see past their partisan blinders, and they're going to vote for an avowed socialist. They're going to do it. That's just the way, unfortunately, partisan politics works in America.
To the point, did you read anything into the large numbers of voters voting for Trump in New Hampshire at an entirely uncontested primary?
Yeah. What that tells you, because we saw the same thing in Iowa, where his numbers were, it was slightly contested with Bill Weld and Joe Walsh on the ballot.
It's a little different because it's a caucus, though. But
there were, they had a lot higher turnout in the Republican caucuses that they were planning on as well. Trump's base is at max lit.
Just cause.
Just cause, but I think the impeachment has done it as well.
Yes.
I think
that's a great point.
I think between how the economy is doing and the impeachment, what that impeachment did is Trump already had a very personal relationship with his base, but it is, man, they just had a baby, dude. They're on a honeymoon. They went back on a second honeymoon. They just had a baby. All right, brought the kid home, and grandma came down and is watching the kid because now mama's past her 6 weeks when she can have sex again after giving birth, and they're like in the Caribbean right now. That's Trump and his base right now. Okay. That's where they're at. And you're going to find out mama got pregnant again. And the two brothers are only 9.5 months apart. How'd that happen? All right. That's where Trump and his base is right now. And I don't see that changing at all. I don't. I don't, that base, it doesn't matter if there's a stock market bubble, a North Korean test rocket off the Atlantic Ocean. No, you can thank the Democratic Party and liberal cable news at night. I mean, they're reunited, man, and it feels so good, man. And that honeymoon's lasting all the way to the first Tuesday in November. All right, they're not. You know what? If you see the trailer rocking, don't come a knocking. All right, that's where Trump's base is at right now, and that's what you saw in the turnout in Iowa and New Hampshire. That's what that was, and that's not going to change. But if the economy sours, you're going to find out just how many people really don't like Donald Trump, that they're willing to vote for a socialist. That's because in the end, materialism reigns. I wish that weren't the case. I wish that it weren't, but unfortunately, more people vote on what the price of gas, literally, more people vote on what the price of gas is than my state legislature in Colorado voted yesterday not to protect babies who survived abortions and are alive. And it's not even close. Far more people do. And it works both ways. Far more people are voting on the price of gas than Greta Thunberg's climate change rant, because they're all in on it. Far more people. It's not even close. Materialism is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 reasons people vote. Okay. Any thoughts on that?
Nope, I'm good.
Is that bad?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, on one hand, it is what it is, brother. It's human nature. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. On the other hand, I don't blame you if you're in a truly economically challenged or distressed time, like the Carter years, for example. But it does speak to a growing shallowness within the culture. And one of the things that we allowed the left to do, and this mistake was made before people like me came along in different eras, is we allowed the left to put their religious viewpoint, which is what socialism is. It's a religion. It's a denomination of the statist religion. You can call it liberalism, progressivism, socialism, communism. And these denominations don't always agree with one another. They have their Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox and Mormons and Jews too, okay? They don't agree with each other all the time, okay? But they're coming from the same source, same cue. And that is it's a statist religion. Once we permitted them to make their statist religious arguments in purely economical terms, where the idea of stealing your money and giving it to somebody who didn't earn it was no longer a moral debate, but an economic one. Could we afford Medicare, or could we afford not to? Could we afford Medicare Part D, or could we afford not to? Once we allowed the left to frame their arguments in purely materialistic means, we lost the ability to call the American people to a deeper conversation. And they don't want that deeper conversation, by the way. They want it to be workers of the world unite. They want this to be the opiate for the masses. The dumber the people are, the more shallow they are, the more they fall for these fallacies. So once we decided that you're right, don't call me racist, so let's just have a financial debate about what the top marginal tax rate is. We played right into their hands generationally. And so we've almost set it up that the voters don't know anything else to largely vote on other than their materialistic well-being, because we played right into the left's hands by making it about that.
To answer Aaron's questions, that's why it is wrong, because we're a nation founded on a creed, and it's not workers of the world unite.
Amen. More Feedback Friday in a moment.
You're listening to Steve Deace
on the Blaze Radio Network.
following the truth, no matter where it leads. The Steve Deace Show.
Well, let me remind you about the sad tale of Deborah. She had her home stolen, not the stuff in the home, but the home itself. FBI calls it home title theft and says it's one of the fastest growing white collar crime sprees in the country. And it's because scammers can do to you what they did to Deborah. They found her home title online, and then they filed fraudulent documents claiming they owned the home. Instead, she ended up getting evicted from her home. It gets even worse. She lost $85,000 in equity in her home. 85 grand gone. No one believes their home can be stolen this easily, but that's why you need to get home title lock, because no insurance or bank protects you and your home from this title theft. First things first, though, go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim and don't even know it yet. And then sign up to help protect the legal title to your home so that you don't end up like Deborah. Act now to get started for 60 risk-free days of protection. 60 risk-free days of protection if you go to HometitleLock.com. 60 risk-free days of protection at HometitleLock.com. So let's get back to some of the feedback Friday and some of the reaction on social media to the question, are we underestimating Bernie Sanders on the right the way the left underestimated Donald Trump in 2016? Sean writes, this amazes me. Draw a line in the sand for once in your life and don't let a guy like this win. But because you won't, he will. This reminds me of a conversation I had when we first were put on the big Salem network, when you guys first came to work here. And it was about a month before the Iowa caucuses, right after the holidays. And they brought me and Prager and Medved and Shapiro and Bill Bennett and Eric Metaxas. I'm sure I'm forgetting some names that were on the network. They brought us all out to this posh 5-star hotel in Santa Barbara, right on the beach, man. It was awesome, right on the beach. And one of the things we did there, one of the reasons we were there is to have then spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, Sean Spicer, school us on how to be our GOP shills. And I just pulled that scene in The Natural where he just gets up and walks out with the sports psychologist. Okay. I just got up and walked out. I can only I tried, man. I want the record to show I wasn't, you asked that question yesterday in the overtime. I know I'm not supposed to spoil it about the guy punching the back of the woman's seat.
Yeah.
And the question you asked was, hey, did he at least try talking to her first? I want you all to know, I did try to be a good corporate citizen first. I did. I did try to sit there. I did try to listen. I did try to poker face it. And I probably put up with a good 15 minutes or so of it. All right. And then I had to hit the eject. And I really didn't do it for me. I did it for them. Because I finna explode. Okay. And it was going to be really awkward and uncomfortable. And you guys were probably going to lose your jobs before they ever started after I got done with what I was finna going to do in there. Okay. So I want you to know it was an act of valor, not rebellion. It was an act of valor for me to get up and walk out of that room because I needed to protect your jobs as well as the welfare of everyone else in that room. Okay, for the explosion that was I could sense was building up.
Protect your gilded coattails at all costs. I approve
yes,
of that.
Absolutely, yes. And the other thing they had us do is they wanted us to meet all the corporate VPs for all the stations, Salem stations, stuff around the country. And so part of that was the last night we were out there, they put together this VIP roundtable and we were all on the stage together and taking questions from the audience and stuff. And one of the questions, in the very first question, Bennett had announced he was retiring. And so he moderated and got to ask the questions. And the first question he asked is, if Donald Trump is the GOP nominee, will you support him? And they asked me first because I live in Iowa. So Bill asked me first. And I said, we don't have to, Iowa doesn't vote for 3 more weeks. we don't, if you don't trust the guy's character, because there was a lot of kvetching and no weighing, can't trust this guy at this meeting. Okay. And everybody was saying this. And I mean, everybody. All right. And I'm like, we don't have to just sit here and let him win. This is the largest Christian media company on the continent. Just say, no, we can do better than that. We can do better than, I tapped a porn star with my wife at home nursing my child. And I'm on my third marriage and I'm not a 3-time widow. And I'm proud of the bankruptcies I filed and 2 Corinthians. I mean, all the stuff that we were talking about 4 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, you won't have to sit here and just wait for it to happen. I don't think he's going to win Iowa. I'm doing my part. I'm helping Ted Cruz. I've been helping him for 4 months. I don't think he's going to win Iowa. And he didn't. I was right. But if I'm right and he doesn't win Iowa, you guys have the kind of network to take whoever we send out of our state and launch him the rest of the way. I mean, he needs you. You don't need him. You have the largest network of you guys. You guys are the National Religious Broadcasters Convention every year. You underwrite it, basically. You're its lead sponsor. This is the 3rd largest radio network in the United States. It's the largest Christian media corporation in the United States. You reach more of the GOP base than he ever will. Just say, no, we're not doing that. And we're going to do this instead. I thought for sure, and I mean, I got prayed up before I said it. I'm like, don't let me go off like on the John the Baptist tip with wailing arms and bony finger points. Let me try to be reasonable as in my presentation. And so I probably was as reasonable as I could be in that particular state. Okay. When I thought for sure I spoke clearly and in well understood English. When I got done, dude, and looked out in that crowd, it was like Charlie Brown listening. I mean, it was the blank stares. Like this could not compute. The idea that we would like affirmatively use our resources to not let someone we don't want to have to vote for win. Like we just wouldn't we wouldn't just wait for the process to play out and then try to negotiate our seat at the table afterwards with somebody we don't really like and trust. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking at the time, my time in this network is going to be very, very short-lived. It's going to last about another 30 minutes because that's how much longer this roundtable is. Because for a lot of these people, this is the first time. I'm not Dennis Prager and all these people in this network that have been on it for decades. This is the first time they've ever met me. And I'm, Phil Boyce's shiny new toy, the head of the network, and I'm going to be his next Mark Levin. He told me in Hannity that he discovered these guys. I'm going to be his next star, and he wants to show me off.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. It's a little bit like you think you discovered Taylor Swift, before she went nuts, like Nashville Taylor Swift. And you heard her write that song, what's that? What was the first love song that launched her career? My daughters loved it. I can't remember.
Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. That song. Okay, you think she's going to play that when you put her in front of the record executives on Music Row?
Sorry, America, about what we just went through. Yes, and figuring that out.
Love story. Okay, that's what it is. Story, so you think she's going to? I mean, you heard this wonderful 19-year-old girl with a great voice and great singing talent and songwriting talent write her own moving love song, and you're like, we found the next Tammy Wynette. Just, you know what I'm saying? And so you call all your Music Row record execs, they come all in to hear her sing, and you think she's going to bust out Love Story, and instead she's got her take on this really esoteric Velvet Underground indie rock tune from the 60s, and you're like, that GIF again? That's what the room is like, all right? And you're realizing that you're no longer going to be friends with these record company executives when this is over. That's what this event was like. They could not contemplate that we could take control of our own destiny. And when we got done, I had one person come up to me. He was actually the youngest VP in the room, even younger than me. And he came up to me, goes, man, and he looked around too and make sure nobody can hear him. Thank you so much for saying that. I've been trying to get through to these people for like 4 months on this. Everybody's freaking out. Trump can't win. He's immoral. Why are we sitting around? Why are we doing this? And I keep sending off emails. I'm like, we own 10,000 radio stations. Why are we the ones concerned here about who will win? We can determine who wins. And he's like, they just don't see it that way. They don't get that. And Sean, that's my answer to your Facebook post. Human nature is really good about taking bold stands when it's left with no other alternative but that or death. It is not so good at affirmatively acting. There's at least 3 occasions. Well, maybe 3 is too much. Looking back, I'll say 2. On at least 2 occasions, the French could have wiped Adolf Hitler off the map. Off the map. They didn't. On at least 2, they could have done it. They didn't. One time, one time, the Nazi Panzer Division on its way into France had like massive mechanical failure and was stalled out on an open road defenseless. Like almost the entire Nazi infantry unit. True story. And the French aerial recon stumbles across it. And their recon goes back to high command and says, hey guys, why just wait for him to get to Paris? These guys are stalled out in the French countryside, not a lot of civilians. Let's just go wipe them. We don't have to do the barn like we did in World War I. We have to do that one again. Let's just go wipe them out right now. Right now. I mean, fate's delivered them into our hands. French high command's like, that can't be that simple. We're going to hang out here in Paris. True story. That actually happened. It wasn't the first time. That's what human nature typically is. You know why? Because we're sons of Adam. And when the devil stepped to his wife, what did Adam do? Oh, hell no. Let me go grab a switch. I'm the vicar of this planet. God Almighty said I'm in charge. Not this little slitherer. Let me teach him a lesson or two about, I'm a human being and you're crawling on your belly around here. Who's the superior Is that what Adam did? No, he didn't.
Just a bit outside.
No, he didn't do any of that. He just, I got my law degree from Costco. That's what he did. He did that. And so that's what we've been doing that ever since. That's what we do as a species. We're real good about the big, bold Alamo stand when there's no back door and no way out. Not so good at why don't we squash this now before it starts rolling downhill? That's typically what we do. So 70% of the Democratic Party, maybe more, doesn't want Bernie Sanders to be its nominee. Is that a big number?
70?
That's a pretty big number.
That's sizable.
It's a lot of people. So then the only logical thing for them to do is not a damn thing and just let it happen. That's what human nature does. That is what it does. But let me tell you what they're going to be really good at. Okay? This will be a virtuoso performance. When and if he is the nominee and the economy doesn't tank and he's looking at, helping Donald Trump become the first Republican president since 2004 to win the popular vote. And only the second one in 30 years. And maybe like winning the popular vote by like 5 or 6 points, like some massive number. Okay. And it's a down ballot disaster for the Democratic Party. As a whole bunch of corporate America that doesn't like Trump on a personal level lines up to support him to stop Jeremy Corbyn from winning. And Bill Maher ends up saying like post Labor Day, I could never bring myself to vote for Trump, but I'm not voting for Bernie Sanders. Never Sanders. Right? Here's what all those 70% of Democratic primary voters who won't stop him now. Here's what they're going to be really good at if the economy doesn't tank. Sometime around mid-October. They'll be really good at it then. And then like every day from the first Wednesday in November on for the next 6 months, dude, they're going to be freaking Mozart at it. Okay. I told you that guy couldn't win. Told you he had no shot. Nobody listened to me. Nobody wanted to do anything about it. Right. Are they going to be really good at that?
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to be really good at it. You know why? Because I lived this. It's called post 2012. where I was the most terrible person in America, had to be fired and excommunicado from this movement in conservative media for simply pointing out a lying flip-flopper who came up with Barack Obama's worst idea before he had it, cannot beat Barack Obama. I had to go. I was terrible. I was just awful. I had to go. And then when he lost, suddenly the amount of people who wanted to come back to me and say, you know what, man, I wish somebody would have told me that we should have never nominated the guy that came up with we never even ran an Obamacare, like never came up in the whole election. I see a lot of Democrats do that. You guys have any thoughts on that?
It'll be enjoyable to watch.
Yes. We're still going to have the jokes, right?
We're always going to have the jokes, Aaron. Yes. I won't take those away from you. I promise. All right.
That's good.
Megan Gustafson says, yes, Bernie Sanders is a threat. I don't know why so many people my age and younger support his ideas. I know if he would have gotten the nomination, I think if he gets the nomination, he would probably beat Trump. People I know where I live either don't vote or went third party because they thought Sanders, or didn't vote in 2016 or went third party because they thought Sanders got screwed.
What was her name?
Megan Gustafson was her name.
Wow. She shares a name with one of the best female college basketball players of the last 5 years or so. That's
at the University of Iowa?
At the University of Iowa.
But Megan Gustafson was a brunette, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a strawberry blonde. It's not her.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was distracted by that, and I didn't even hear the question. So
that's what's in her avatar. I can barely see what she is. I don't know where she lives. But anyway.
Yeah. What do you think, Todd?
No. I don't. Many people my age, it sounds like you are in
she's young.
An understandable bubble where I sympathize with you for how the level of insanity you must be surrounded by on a regular basis. But there's all kinds of grown-ups out there I know who will virtue signal all the time about leftist things, but at the end of the day, they really like their houses and their cars and their stuff, and it's going to be a bridge too far.
Let's say we had the Logan's Run rule with elections. Do you remember that movie when we were kids?
I remember it, but I'm not entirely sure the rule.
So Logan's Run is a great sci-fi movie from the 70s, and it's based on a book, I think. But the point of the movie, starring Michael York, is that at age 29, you're given on your 30th birthday, you're given a huge party. All right. And supposedly you're sent off to like utopia, but really you're Soylent Green. All right. You're no longer of any use to society. Okay. So let's say we had the Logan's Run rule with voting, and nobody older than 30 could vote. Trump versus Sanders, what happens?
Sanders wins.
Yeah.
But well, of course he does. What's the margin, though? What is it?
Oh,
85 to 15.
Yeah. You think it's that much?
Yeah.
I'd say 3-1. Yeah. 3-1.
So the question we've got to answer as conservative media is this. Is that how much of that is typical? You're just that liberal when you're younger. You fall for it. How much, and then maybe you grow up, you get a business, you get married, you have kids, you realize maybe life's a little bit messier than the utopian scheme your college professor sold you, that you're still paying for in student loans, and how much of it is religious fervor. That's the question of that generation, right?
Yes.
How much of it is their age, and then how much of it is their religion? That's the question. And I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to discover it in the time to come.
It's moving in the direction of religion.
I think it's probably more religiosity than it's been in past generations. I agree. I'm not ready to say it's overwhelmingly religious yet, but I do think it's more religious than it has been in past eras. On that, I absolutely agree with you. That's going to do it for this Friday. We're going to stick around and do some overtime. Best and worst of the week for our BlazeTV subscribers. For the rest of you, have a fantastic weekend. Don't forget, we're off on Monday, so we will see you all again on Tuesday. Until then, John 3:17.
This is Steve Deace
on the Blaze Radio Network.